question which I think is very important for young people in the Muslim world. They want to know the answer. And the question is, our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from the time he arrived in Medina in 622 to the time he left us in 632, what did he do to transform these people from people who had no relevance in the world, and the same people became leaders of the world? So I would really like to start with you, Dr. Seyyed Hossein Nasr. I basically want to ask you this question, that what in your opinion was this, what led to this transformation? Please.
I'm very glad that you have chosen this question, because during the last century or so, certain trends in the Islamic world have tried to belittle the significance of the Prophet ﷺ in Islam itself. We see that in various ways in various countries, including some movements here on. And so it's very, very important to pay attention. It was once said that in order to love God, God has to love you. And God does not love the person who does not love his prophet. So the love of the prophet, which is foundation for the respect for him and following his uswa, are fundamental to the Islamic religion. And the Quran is very succinct in mentioning that for Surah, you have the uswa hasana, the best example, the best model to follow in life. So any Muslim who believes in God must accept, of course, the text of the Quran, which means to follow the uswa of the Prophet. Uswa is a very wide-ranging word, has many, many meanings. And therefore, the significance of following the model of the Prophet must be always there before us. If we're going to have a revival of Islamic society, we have to go back to following this model, which every generation of Muslims have done since the first century. However, there is a difference that is very important to note. You and I who sit here, I'm sitting here in America, Your Excellency is sitting in Pakistan, we do not have the opportunity to go outside of our house and see the Prophet of Islam. We read about him, sometimes we dream about him if we are blessed. We read poems about him and so forth and so on. We discuss him. The Prophet of God coming out of their house, going to the mosque, in the street, in the souk, to see the Prophet of God, to speak to him. That's unimaginable for us. And that is not an accident. In every religion, around the founder, God places a number of very outstanding people who are chosen through destiny by him to be the carriers of the message of the founder. When the founder of a religion comes, in a sense, heaven and earth meet. It's not the same ordinary situation. The spiritual world somehow descends into our world. I'm just talking like the apostles of Christ, what role they play in Christianity, follow the Buddha and Buddhism and so forth. In Islam also, all of these were simple desert people. They were people whose heart was pure enough to be transformed by the message of Islam and to be able to give everything to it. They were not great intellectuals. There were a few people like Salman al-Farsi or Bilal or other from other civilizations and had some contact with other civilizations, but mostly they were simple Bedouin Arabs. But God gave them this both this opportunity and the character and nature to be able to receive what the Prophet was saying. We cannot conceive, we Muslims of the 21st century, what it would mean to hear a verse of the Quran for the first time from the mouth of the Prophet. That's unimaginable to us. But these people were destined to do so. So the period, not only the Medinan period, which Your Excellency mentioned just a moment ago, but also the Meccan period, which is extremely important, although only a small community. It was the nascent community that then flowered in Medina. In both periods of the Prophet's life, what the Prophet did, which is significant, was to be able to present the message of God, but also have an audience that were so drawn to him, who could hear his message, who give their lives for it, who give their whole thought, transform their language, the way of thinking, and the way of living. The heathenism that exists in the world before it suddenly become the first generation, the first nasr of the Islamic community, of which the Prophet said, "This is the best generation of my ummah." And certainly we always try to draw examples from them. So what we have to do is to understand this providential situation, which we cannot share in because God has chosen us to be born in Pakistan and Iran, myself, and other places 1400 years later, but in which we can share by the fact that the presence of God at this particular moment of history creates events which are meta-temporal. That's why the way the Prophet walked into a house putting his right foot first, or when he entered the empty room, we say, Assalamu alaikum, we still do inwardly. What creates our character, our thought, our mind, the way we behave, most of all, how we act towards our Creator, towards God, towards the creation, towards humanity, towards the rest of the world, of nature. All of this was determined by the Prophet at a particular moment of human history, which for us is the beginning of the Islamic revelation, and especially crystallized in Medina. Because in Mecca, you only had a number of followers of the Prophet, but a small number. Medina is the first Islamic society, the first time in which the teachings of the Prophet are crystallized into structures which continue to this day. They always have been an ideal. They have fallen short in many ways, but the ideal is always there. And it goes back to the Medinan community. That is the golden age of Islam. Not the 11th century when the great scholars like Ibn Sina and Al-Biruni and so forth appeared and that people said the golden age of Islam. No, the golden age of Islam is the first community around the Prophet, the date which Your Excellency just mentioned, in Medina, where the first Islamic society was formed. And as long as Islam is there, which will be until the end of the world, that period remains the ideal for us. We have to learn from it. And we have to learn from it, not in matters which have changed, how to get on a bus or a train, but on spiritual, moral attitudes, on intellectual knowledge, on what really determines our view of the nature of reality. That has not changed. All the talk that we give about evolution and change and development and modernism, it's all superficial. 2 and 2 is still 4. Thank you.